This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Saturday Down South national columnist Connor O'Gara giving us time on Mondays. Always appreciate that. Connor, we played earlier in the show the series of attempts that the Washington Commanders had trying to get a hold of Ricky Stromberg to tell him he's the third-round pick. And once Ron Rivera did get a hold of him, he referred to him as kiddo. We were kicking around whether or not Coach Rivera calls everybody kiddo. Because you know how some people are. They just get into a rut. They forget someone's name and just always call whomever kiddo, chief, boss, hoss, that kind of thing. Do you have any names that you always refer to people for, or is there one that sticks in the back of your mind as one you can't stand?
It's a good question, because all of them are pretty condescending, right? I mean, I feel like if I do it, I usually call someone guy, and I'm saying it somewhat sarcastically, like, all right, take it easy, guy. But I don't think I have one in the holster ready to go if I forget someone's name. Should we look into that and think that Ricky Stromberg is not going to be the starting center now with Washington because of his head coach doesn't even know his name? Probably not very high on the depth chart yet.
I think he had just watched Kill Bill and was thinking of Beatrice Kiddo, so I think it's a good omen.
Okay, all right. You know what? That's the beauty of the draft. Whatever you want to spin it into, you kind of can with the way this all sets up. Kiddo's a good thing.
So what were the numbers as far as number of players selected out of the SEC in this year's draft? Because I know for years, I don't know how long it's been, but it's been a long time that the SEC has had the most players drafted. But the Big Ten kind of caught up a little bit this year, didn't they? Yeah,
I think it was like 62 to 55. I can't remember the final total, but I was tracking it throughout because, I mean, the Big Ten was within arm's reach for a minute there and kind of finished right there in that spot. Like, that's going to be the norm moving forward, especially as both these conferences rather expand to 16 teams starting next year. Like, that's not going to change anytime soon. I've been trying to think about it for a while when the SEC is actually going to lose that draft title, which I think is 18 years now or something, 17? I can't remember. It's up there, though. But it feels like we're at a place where no matter what, you can pencil in the SEC for just having guys late in the draft that teams are going to default to. And, I think it's interesting looking at some of the way too early mocks, which I'm a sicko, so I did that. And I'm trying to figure out, all right, who are these guys next year that are going to be coming off the board early? And a lot of them really aren't giving love to the SEC. Like, I saw one that only had 4 SEC picks in the first round, which would just be shocking to see that few SEC players come off the board. But I just kind of tell myself, this is going to get itself figured out, and the SEC will probably end up having 9 or 10 guys come off early on night one.
Connor, I thought the Eagles might have had the best draft. I don't know who was your thought. I mean, they were able to get the best player, I thought, in Jalen Carter, 9th overall, and they have a talented team. Who's a team or two you thought that had the best draft?
Yeah, I loved what the Eagles did. Just draft Georgia defensive players. What can go wrong? It's a great strategy. I mean, it worked for them last year. Jordan Davis, being able to get him, and then Nakobe Dean somehow falling to them. And I know his numbers year one weren't particularly good, but they actually feel really good about kind of where he's at. He's going to be starting this year. And then just going out and getting Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter in round 1, and then Keely Ringo later on in day 3. I mean, it's pretty amazing to see what Howie Roseman, a Florida grad, what he's doing, drafting all these Georgia guys. And for the NFC champs, it looks like a really smart strategy. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, as a Bears fan, I was kind of bummed that they didn't go after Jalen Carter. And then I kind of told myself, you know what? They don't really have the infrastructure in place where he can succeed. It's not like he's going to go to a situation like what he has in Philly where you get Fletcher Cox and Jordan Davis that you're going to be playing alongside with. You're going to go nose to nose with Jason Kelsey every day. I just think that's a great culture for him. But, yeah, I don't know. I look at it from that standpoint. I really like what the Texans did early on by going up and getting Will Anderson with that number 3 pick overall. You get the 2 and the 3 pick, which is just so rare in the NFL draft. You get your quarterback of the future in C.J. Stroud. You get Will Anderson, who, in my opinion, is the most can't-miss prospect of this draft class. And so I'd probably say those 2 teams, the Eagles and Texans, were the ones that I was really high on.
What did you make of Jahmyr Gibbs and where he was picked? That was the biggest surprise of the first.
What was he,
round.
12 to Detroit? Was that where he was? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 12 to Detroit. Not mocked by anybody that I saw. I mean, it was kind of like, is he going to be a first-round guy? Maybe he'll be the second running back off the board. Bijan will be first. He'll be second. Nobody saw that coming. And at the time, we're like, wait a minute, you got DeAndre Swift. You just signed David Montgomery to a 3-year contract. Like, what are you doing? And then it makes sense a little bit more 2 days later when you realize they traded DeAndre Swift, another Georgia guy, to the Eagles. And you're now in a situation where Jahmyr Gibbs can kind of plug a couple of different holes for you. Jameson Williams is suspended for the first 6 games because of the gambling thing. So you get a pass-catching back in Jahmyr Gibbs. And that's an offense that feels really good about kind of where they're at with Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator. So I was surprised. Look, I was finding myself wondering, is there that much difference between Jahmyr Gibbs and Kenny McIntosh? Kenny McIntosh, star for Georgia, who didn't come off the board until the 7th round because he ran a 4.62 at the combine. Like, if there's that much difference between those guys, but I think Gibbs is a stud, and I loved what he was able to do in his 1 year at Alabama.
Yeah, you got Connor. You got Raheem Rocket Sanders. There's another name, but when we're looking at some stuff about KJ Jefferson and Raheem Sanders, the Rocket, going into next year's draft, what do you think those two guys got to do? Because they're both probably going to get drafted next year, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think, and I can't remember who had Rocket in the first round of the way too early mock. Somebody had him in there. Not necessarily a surprise to see that after all the great things he did last year, exploding onto the scene. I would expect definitely Rocket's going to be a candidate to come off the board as one of the first backs. Running backs are difficult to kind of figure out. They just kind of are. And he'll still have to test really well, even if he has an awesome year. I mean, there's so many things that go into this, the scheme that you play in, playing in a little bit more of a pro-style scheme. If he gets to maybe catch some passes out of the backfield as well, a former receiver, obviously, who's got a lot of different skills, I think he could be a really intriguing prospect. And then KJ, it's what we talk about all the time. Can he make that next step as a passer? Can he master the concepts that Dan Enos is going to want him to be able to operate under? And can he figure out, okay, this is what I need to do to show that I am truly a next-level guy? I think that he's projecting as more of like a mid-round guy, but at the same time, the size is there. You know that this is a day and age in which mobile quarterbacks are being treated differently than they were 10, 20 years ago. So I think KJ is a fascinating case, but he's got to show that passing development in this year with Dan Enos.
Whomever provided the smokescreen for the whole Will Levis first round, maybe first overall pick, but definitely top 10, like they deserve a promotion or whatever. Because, I mean, I bought it. I think a lot of people bought it. Mel Kiper kept banging the drum about Will Levis. But the more you look at his numbers and remember watching him play from this last year, and that Kentucky was just all right even when he was there, it's like I never understood the hype around him. Like, I understand he's a great athlete. He's got great size, howitzer of an arm, but he's amazingly inconsistent. There was a lot of interest. I didn't buy it, and apparently not a lot of other teams did too.
I think he went where he should have. I was, for the last year, I felt like I was pro-Levis in terms of who he is as a player and why he projected well, but I was still of the belief that he's a project. You're not taking him to be a day one starter. And what I think was kind of lost in the shuffle of this process is that there is still a divide between the mock draft crowd of the world and NFL front offices. And apparently, it was coming out afterwards. Maybe there was an issue with the turf toe. Maybe he wasn't coming off as good as many thought he was going to in these interviews. Ultimately, though, the guy's a project. He still has room to grow from a decision-making standpoint. Their offensive line was a train wreck this past year. But can he be able to overcome some of those issues moving forward and get rid of the football quicker? Is he going to want to take on as much contact? That's what I kept saying to people over and over. Like, everybody's talking about Bryce Young and the size. Will Levis and Bryce Young took like the same amount of sacks, and Will Levis missed more time because Will Levis takes on so much more contact. So he's got a huge arm. I like the ability that he has to make plays with his legs. And the accuracy is there, but the decision-making needs to be better. And he's going to go to a place where, maybe they're going to develop him as a project with the Titans. But I am interested to kind of see what this next step looks like and if he can truly develop.
So here's a pick that I love, and it's not just because I'm a Steelers fan. Broderick Jones. He's going to be their new left tackle. You can just put him in there. He's going to be the Steelers' new starting left tackle because then I think Stetson Bennett is a great college quarterback, but there were some limitations physically that he had. But when you have that good of an offensive line in front of him and a guy like Jones blocking for you, and you're not in your back very much, not getting chased around as often. I know he could get away from it sometimes, but I thought that was such a fantastic pick. And I'm wearing some Steelers colored glasses because that's my team. But I love the pick. I love where he came from. And I love the fact that he blocked for that guy.
You guys, picture this. Stetson had multiple games last year in which he comes to the post-game press conference and he says, I don't think I was touched by a defender today. Can you picture KJ Jefferson showing up to a post-game press conference and ever say, guys, I don't think I was touched today? I mean, it's just different worlds that they operate out of, and that's in part because obviously the protection's really good. How Stetson was used in Todd Monken's offense is very different. But yeah, when in doubt, just draft Georgia guys and kind of hope for the best.
Was there? I like where Devin A-Chain. I think that dude's going to be a stud. Was there a late round pick? I know he's 84th, but what was maybe a late round pick that you think that's going to have success?
Matt, you read my mind. I love me some Devin A-Chain. That dude is a stud. He is not just a speed guy. And I watched him run through contact, but for an offense that could not stretch the field whatsoever with Jimbo Fisher. And his ability to make that home run play when there isn't really that big of a window, man, like he was so fun to watch. And I'm of the belief that he's going to end up being their starter for the Dolphins at the end of his first year. Mike McDaniel, I was reading some of the quotes about how much he's just like trying to get as much speed at the skill positions as humanly possible. And you know that they can already stretch the field with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and getting a back like A-Chain that can just hit the home run. Man, I think that was a super underrated thing. I would not be surprised if he ends up being the best running back from this class, and that includes Bijan Robinson, who, look, I totally understand you have to draft Bijan as the number one running back prospect, but, man, I think A-Chain brings a lot more to the table than just speed, and I think he's somebody that, like, 2-3 years from now when we're all doing our fantasy drafts, he's going to be the guy who's like, oh, yeah, we're drafting him in, like, the second round as an RB1.
Yeah, he fits the NFL system good, Phil. I mean, the dude can catch. He can do a little bit of everything. I like his game.
Well, now we've got the end of the NFL draft coinciding with the end of the transfer portal window for the spring season. So that's closed. You can you can get commitments out of the transfer portal now, but you no longer can have players entering the transfer portal. So I guess that's the next thing for us to pay attention to, Connor. And I guess the other thing would be the athletic directors meetings for the SEC in Destin. That's usually that's coming up pretty soon. And I guess that might also be the next time we hear about potential taking away home games when fans storm the field. That'll be the next topic.
I thought you were going to go in the scheduling direction. That's what I think we're going to actually find out about, if we're going to hear about a conference scheduling model, if it's going to be 8 games or if it's going to be 9 games. Apparently, some teams that still want the 8-game conference schedule, I think ultimately we get the 9-game conference schedule. I think that'll be announced in Destin. I'd be surprised if we had any more sort of disagreements on that, if there was some sort of a stalemate. They have a timeline to get this figured out because they usually come up with the new schedule for the upcoming season, like during the season. So they're going to want to get this squared away before the season starts. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma coming changes everything, and they're going to have to do a little bit more from a creativity standpoint. But I think they already kind of have that figured out of which team is, the permanent rival and what the rotating home and homes are going to look like. So, yeah, I would expect an announcement on that in the next few weeks here.
It feels like the 9-game thing is a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of who your quote-unquote permanent opponents would be. Connor, I subscribe to The Athletic. I think it's a great resource. They have a piece about what SEC scheduling used to look like, and I wasn't aware of how ridiculous this was, because it was the coaches that basically decided who they played and when they played them, and you had Ole Miss and Alabama that went 21 years without playing each other in an 8-team league. You had situations where there were games that were played, like Alabama might play North Carolina, but it counted as an SEC game. It's just, if we think scheduling is weird now, I mean, goodness gracious, before the television thing happened in 1984. I mean, here's a for instance. Alabama and Ole Miss actually did have a home and home. I think it was 1979 and 1980. And those games didn't even count in the league standings. It's like the SEC scheduling, if you don't think it makes sense now, it made less sense then.
Yeah, great piece from Seth Emerson that I've had bookmarked and I've been waiting to read post-draft. That's on my list of reads for this week, because I didn't even fully know that. I mean, I didn't grow up in the SEC footprint, which, I've talked about here before. But, yeah, for all the times in which I bring up the point how weird it is that Georgia has not played a game at Texas A&M, who's been in the conference for more than 10 years now, and they weren't scheduled to until 2024. But, for all that discussion about how these teams never play each other, it's weird to think that you could have a time in which the conference was only 8 teams, and there were teams that would just go 2 decades without playing each other. And, hopefully with this new scheduling model, we're going to get some more clarity, and we're going to get a little bit more of that schedule parity in terms of, teams actually getting to face everybody in their conference and not going 6-7 years without facing one another.
BetOnline.ag is your #1 source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.